Justice Service Commission have been meeting to discuss which of the 4 Chief Justice nominees it will recommend for the appointment of Chief Justice. Judge Zondo was the last candidate to be questioned yesterday, and tempers flared, resulting in a heated exchange between EFF leader Julius Malema and Justice Minister Ronald Lamola. It centred on Malema's accusations that Lamola had acted unlawfully to ensure that Judge President Dunstan Mlambo was appointed to serve as an acting Concourt Justice, which Lamola denies. Political analyst Ongama Mtimka joins us to unpack the interview process. Thank you very much, Ongama. Always great to have you on the show. At a very base level, such kinds of commissions and the interactions that take place within them, the processes that form part of this decision-making in these interviews, surely should be conducted with some level of dignified conduct from all those involved. That doesn't say that one cannot get heated, but what did you make of the exchanges yesterday and what impact that has on possibly derailing the process?
Sure. So South Africans are genuinely or rightly concerned about the nature of the relationship between the executive and the judiciary, and the extent to which political imperatives of a particular grouping within the executive may have an influence on judicial independence. This is something that cannot be escaped in any democracy. So at the first revelation of the process that led to the acting of Justice Mlambo as acting in the Constitutional Court, one was taken aback by the involvement of the minister, but I think that was clarified in terms of how it's provided for in the law. Then the second question is a structural issue. It's not a question of legality. It's a question of the permissibility, especially in a political environment as toxic as ours, of this provision. Now, it's good that the question of legality has been dealt with, but the question around the openness to abuse of the privileges or the rights accorded to the minister in the process is not a debate that can be closed by settling the legality question.
Is this the right forum to be having this debate on? And what do you say about arguments that play the man instead of playing the issue? Maybe this is just a personal remark, but in a lot of the engagements from EFF leader Julius Malema, one can say that instead of playing the issue at hand, a lot of the side issues become the focus. And in this stage, or in this case, it was about being called a liar. Why do we see this constant derailment and issues of taking things personally when the issues at play are really much bigger than the people involved?
I think for completeness' sake also I must state that I was quite comfortable with how Acting Chief Justice Zondo spoke freely and truthfully about the nature of communication between himself and the minister, as well as between himself and President Cyril Ramaphosa, and driving the message that there was nothing to hide in those conversations. Because to me, the fact that he can speak freely and truthfully about it suggests that, at least as far as he is concerned, he may not necessarily be a party to whatever conspiracies people are alleging the executive may be up to when it, seeks to influence the judiciary. You're quite right that some of the engagements were too personal. In fact, not just against, the minister it was mostly against the candidates. And I think that there were there was a letter, for example, written which took exception to the conduct of the commissioners there. And I think I agree with some of the issues that have been raised there, especially how certain things which should have been where candidates should have been accorded a right to be able to submit a response. Things didn't happen in that way. What it leaves us is a question of whether or not the commissioners wanted to be malicious in their approach. And obviously, I mean, we can't allow politicians to negatively affect what otherwise ought to be a rigorous process of arriving at the best candidates that the president can appoint for the Constitutional Court for the Chief Justice.
This is a very weighty position that is being considered here. And like you rightfully said, a number of questions raised about the candidates themselves. We just heard a bite from Judge Dennis Davis saying that there were issues with some of the questions posed to candidate Mandisa Maya, and that sexism shouldn't come into it. Allegations of sexual misconduct also raised. And once again, people saying this is not the right forum for those questions to be raised. But unfortunately, once they are, the damage is already done. Do you think South Africans are looking at the questions raised by Commission members and asking themselves whether the candidates, whether there is malicious intent in trying to discredit candidates and what the political motivation could be?
Absolutely. And in fact, members of the public on various platforms have begun to ask the question about the appropriateness of politicians who are less qualified and very often less experienced, asking questions from justices who preside over the courts. Obviously, I mean, our democratic system is meant to be that these politicians are voted for by the people, and therefore they ought to represent the people. Yes, indeed, the question of malicious intent arises more so given the fact that people know the right processes to follow to raise questions about the conduct of judges, among other things. And whenever they don't use those platforms and use a platform which is not like the interviews, then one has got to, unfortunately, entertain a question of whether or not there's a malicious intent. And in fact, I think both in terms of the role that the minister played in the specific name of Dustin Mlambo, okay, and also the discussions with the president and the State Capture Commission, and also the apparent preference of politicians as to who should lead the judiciary, places us in American-style processes of, selecting justices for courts, where it's blatantly political. It's known that certain candidates are conservatives and others are liberals, and therefore there's a very blatant, contestation for placing people. I would like to believe that justices in South Africa remain open enough to be guided by cases before them, as opposed to ideological leanings. And as such, I am comforted that whoever of these four justices gets to be appointed as Chief Justice are people who respect themselves and the profession enough not to allow whatever political, rationale may have pushed certain people to recommend their names, or in fact may have pushed even some who are within the radical strands or purportedly radical strands of the ANC, any of those four judges, to me, whoever is preferred by the factions, in my view, it will be inconsequential, because these are people who have proven themselves to be guided by, in many instances, by the evidence that's before them in arriving at decisions. But it's concerning that there are political machinations about, where people are contesting about who to appoint, as it happens in the politics of the US and the relationships between politics and the judiciary there.
Ongama, we're seeing a number of, and I say this in inverted commas, attacks on the judiciary. Comments recently by Minister Lindiwe Sisulu about the judiciary and the Constitution. Here in these hearings or the interviews, we've seen also questions raised about the independence of the judiciary. Do you think there's a broader end game at play by specific factions or parties within the ANC to try and drive an agenda? Or is that just piecing coincidences together?
So, to criticize, for example, the nature of the process followed concerning, Justice Mlambo, and the raising of a specific name by Minister Lamola, to me, is fair criticism. And even though Julius Malema's tone at times was a little bit rough around the edges, it's the kind of criticism I would like. And in fact, it led us to the question being answered by the minister as truthfully as they should have. So I'm happy that politicians pay attention to instances where there may be prima facie evidence of either an attempt to influence the judiciary in a wrong way, and then the Chief Justice was able to answer that he had been engaging with that process in good faith, and I was happy with the nature of questions that were asked.
Ongama, unfortunately, sorry, I'm going to have to jump in there. We have to come out of this